Good Thursday morning. Just bear with me as I reset my phone. But I want to invite you into this moment as I'm here to share with you to continue the dialogue. I won't say it's a conversation. As we have been looking at 7 things that will disrupt intimacy. 7 things that will interfere with your ability to be able to experience wholesome intimacy. And if you can recall, last week we spoke about pain. And this week, as we come into the space, we're going to continue looking at pain, because as I went back to look at the clip, I realized I spent most of the time speaking specifically to emotional pain in the relationship. So today I'm going to be zooming in a little bit closer to acknowledge physical pain that sometimes comes about in the sexual relationship, which again can disrupt experiencing satisfying intimacy. But I'm also going to be looking at various dysfunctions that could take place as it relates to things that the husband may be having to navigate through, or things that the wife may have to navigate through. But before I go there, I also want to remind you that in week 1 we spoke about ignorance. Ignorance has a lot to do with not being able to experience satisfying sexual relations. And this is so interesting because we understand that the antidote for ignorance is education. Even as it relates to the services that I provide, a lot of times when individuals come into the space, the re-education or the relearning process is sufficient enough. Relearning process that involves receiving accurate information, which receiving truth is enough to help them to have a different experience with their mate. Again, re-educating, retraining oftentimes is sufficient. That's the bulk of the work that's needed, because oftentimes what happens is people take on mindsets, they take on beliefs, they take on ideals, behaviors that have been taught or introduced to them in early ages, in formative years, and those things are still playing a role in the way that they think about sex, playing a role in the way that they not only think about sex, but even experience sex in their relationship with their mate. So today, I'm going to just spend a few moments just acknowledging, highlighting some other things that will get in the way of experiencing wholesome intimacy. And I just want you to know, again, this is my disclaimer. I'm really just more so going to be doing bullet points around these matters, and certainly if it's something that you are experiencing, I will encourage you, first as a believer, pray, and secondly, then move forward with having a discussion with your mate, and then begin to partner together on a journey for resolution. Okay? Again, these are just bullet points. This is not to provide medical advice or therapeutic advice, if you will, but it's more so about you receiving information so you can begin to get heightened awareness that if this is happening, this will help you to understand this may be a part of the reason that you are not enjoying intimacy with your spouse. So we also understand sexual dysfunctions has a role in not being able to enjoy sex. Sexual dysfunction, means that when something is not working well, when something is not functioning in the way that it ordinarily should function, can be contributing to disruption or pain in the relationship. So some of these sexual dysfunctions or lack of desire disorder is something that not only female can experience, it's also something that male experience. And what desire disorder means is that you no longer, or you just don't have an interest in sex. Now I will say most of the time it is something that more so experienced by women 80% of the time, more so than men. So having a lack of interest in sex could be that at one time you were interested, but now you're no longer interested. So this is something that you would want to explore if you at one point in time you had an interest, or even if you never ever had an interest, still sure, search it out to get an understanding as to what may be happening with you. But this is what we've also come to understand, that you can experience a lack of desire for sex for so many different reasons, especially women, for so many different reasons. But I will say for most women, the primary reason is, especially if there was once an interest in sex, is that of fatigue. Life is busy. The demands of life, the demands of being a mother, the demands of maybe working outside of the home, inside of the home, could be taking a toll on your sexual desire or drive. And for men, sometimes the desire is linked to as well to stress. However, I know that some men, they use sex as a way to de-stress. No shame in that. But we also understand that stress can stifle a male's desire. Also, depression can stifle their desire. If there is emotional pain in the relationship, where there's a psychological baggage or psychological disconnect, it could also interfere with a husband's ability to be interested in sex. It's also interfere with their ability to have an erection. Okay, so desire for sure. But also we have arousal disorder. Arousal disorder, it means that you're not having a sexual response in your body. You may actually have a desire, but you no longer have a response. And I will say too, that is something that can show up for males, as I mentioned a second ago, by way of erectile dysfunction. But female, but again, you have an interest, but there's not a sexual arousal. And these again are things that can cause pain in the relationship. Orgasmic disorder for female is another matter that comes to my attention by way of the services that I provide. That some women experience orgasmic disorder. They have not been able to be orgasmic in the relationship. And I will say, for some people it does require re-education or retraining. For some individuals, it does require having to take a closer look at their upbringing, because for some people, they grew up in an atmosphere that was very rigid, and rigidity is linked to the ability to be able to let go and to experience sex, as well as for some individuals, they may grow up in households where one parent was an alcoholic. And we've come to understand those factors, those variables can contribute to disruption in being able to be orgasmic. But here's the thing, we also understand that there are some people, some women who've never experienced orgasm. And that's okay, in the sense that if we make the bigger picture about sex more around experiencing pleasure, experiencing oneness versus orgasm, it will lead you to having a much more fuller view about sex, one that you can carry throughout, can be a common thread throughout all seasons of the relationship. Because here's the thing, you will go through various seasons in your marriage. You're going to go through various seasons as it relates to your physical body. So again, we don't want to build a sexual relationship around being orgasmic, because there will be some times in life and some seasons in life you indeed may not experience orgasm. And we want you to know that it's common, it's not the end of the world. You still can have a very satisfying, wholesome sexual relationship with your spouse. The other thing I just want to point out is sexual pain is a real thing. Sexual pain in the sense that for some women, they do experience sexual pain through vaginism. And when vaginism is a thing, the pain is felt physically, but it also may have emotional and psychological components around it, as well as trauma. But again, it is a real thing. It's not something you can just push yourself through. It's not something that should be ignored. It is something that you, again, are encouraged to partner together to address. Sometimes women experience vaginal dryness. Bodies are changing. You're going through maybe premenopause or menopause altogether. So there may be hormonal deficiencies, and those things will disrupt the sexual relationship. But be encouraged, okay? Because there's an antidote to these things. There are antidotes to these things, and I will say again, the more you're willing to address these matters together, the more fulfilling your journey will be. Did you hear that? The more you're willing to partner together, the more fulfilling your relationship will be, not just in the area of sex, but in the area of the way that you experience in your marriage altogether. A couple of things I'm going to highlight as it relates to men, and then I'm going to jump off. But erectile dysfunction, I spoke about that earlier. Men can experience erectile dysfunction. Sometimes it can be linked to things that are going on psychologically in his world, stress in his world. But sometimes it's linked to things that maybe experience things he's experienced in his body physically, hypertension, diabetes, okay? We've already mentioned stress, right? Aging. By the time a male has reached the age of 23, he has indeed experienced erectile dysfunction at some point in time. But this is the thing, what we're coming to get glimpses of in this new age, this generation, is that men are experiencing erectile dysfunction at a higher level, and we're thinking it may be linked in part to technology, the overuse of technology, the use of pornography. So there's other matters that could be taking place. And again, if this is your reality, I encourage you to reach out for help. Don't just tolerate it. And then we also, can look at premature ejaculation, look at low testosterone. Understanding too that males' bodies are changing, females' bodies are changing, that as your bodies are changing, we don't want to ignore these matters. They are not to overtake us. It doesn't have to rob you of experiencing pleasure in the relationship, but it does require you to be intentional. It requires you to be bold. It requires you to be courageous. It requires you to partner together with your spouse so that you're not robbed of experiencing this deep connection that not only your body longs for, but your soul longs for, and you get to enjoy.